They said it couldn't be done. They said John Cena was finished. They said Brock Lesnar was unstoppable. Well, guess what? They were dead wrong. What happened at WrestlePalooza wasn't just a wrestling match, it was a complete decimation of everything we thought we knew about modern WWE. And if you think you know how this story ends, think again, because what I'm about to tell you will shatter every assumption you've ever had about these two legends. You see that dislike button down there? I dare you to hit it after you hear what really went down in that ring. Because what John Cena did to Brock Lesnar wasn't just a victory, it was pure, unadulterated revenge served ice cold after years of humiliation. And the way he did it? Absolutely diabolical. Picture this: 80,000 screaming fans packed into the stadium, the entire wrestling world watching, and nobody, and I mean nobody, gave John Cena a chance. The betting odds were 10-1 against him. Wrestling analysts were calling it a funeral for Cena's career. Even his own locker room reportedly thought he was walking into a massacre. But sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible becomes inevitable. Let me paint you the full picture of what led to this earth-shattering moment. For months, Brock Lesnar had been on an absolute tear through the WWE roster. The Beast Incarnate had systematically destroyed every challenger put in front of him. Roman Reigns? Demolished in under 8 minutes. Drew McIntyre? Left lying in a heap after 3 German suplexes. Even The Undertaker himself fell victim to Lesnar's ruthless dominance. The man was quite literally unstoppable. Meanwhile, John Cena had been struggling. Father Time seemed to have finally caught up with the 16-time world champion. His last few matches had been lackluster at best, embarrassing at worst. Critics were calling for his retirement. Social media was brutal, and you know how savage wrestling Twitter can be. The hashtag Cena is finished was trending for weeks. Even longtime Cenation members were starting to turn their backs on their hero. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is something WWE tried to keep under wraps until after the event. 3 weeks before WrestlePalooza, something happened backstage that changed everything. Sources close to the situation, and I'm talking about people with direct access to both wrestlers, revealed that Brock Lesnar made a comment that cut John Cena deeper than any chair shot ever could. During a production meeting, when discussing the match stipulations, Lesnar allegedly looked directly at Cena and said, "This isn't going to be a match, it's going to be a retirement ceremony. Your time is up, old man. I'm going to end your career the same way I ended your credibility, piece by piece." The room went silent. Witnesses described Cena's face as stone cold, but his eyes? His eyes were burning with something they hadn't seen in years. What happened next is where this story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Instead of firing back with words, Cena did something that shocked everyone in that room. He simply stood up, looked Lesnar dead in the eye, and said, "Thank you. You just reminded me who I used to be." Then he walked out without another word. Now, you might be thinking, come on, this sounds like typical wrestling drama. But hold on, because what Cena did in the following 3 weeks was nothing short of legendary. He disappeared. Completely. No social media updates, no public appearances, no interviews. Even WWE executives were starting to panic, wondering if their marquee attraction had actually quit. But Cena wasn't hiding, he was preparing. And by preparing, I mean he went full Rocky Balboa mode. Reports emerged of him training in a private facility in Colorado, working with former UFC fighters, Olympic wrestlers, and submission specialists. He wasn't just getting ready for a wrestling match, he was preparing for war. The transformation was immediate and shocking. When Cena finally resurfaced at a pre-WrestlePalooza press conference, even seasoned wrestling reporters couldn't believe what they were seeing. The man sitting at the table wasn't the same John Cena who had been struggling in recent months. This was a focused, driven, almost dangerous version of the leader of Cenation. His first words at that press conference? "Brock, you wanted to see who I used to be. At WrestlePalooza, you're going to find out who I've become." The intensity in his voice sent chills through the room. Even Lesnar, sitting just a few feet away, seemed taken aback by this new version of his opponent. But let's talk about what everyone was expecting versus what actually happened. The smart money was on Lesnar dominating from bell to bell. His game plan was obvious: use his incredible strength and legitimate fighting background to overwhelm Cena quickly and brutally. Most predictions had the match ending in under 10 minutes with Cena being stretchered out. Here's a question for you veteran wrestling fans out there. Drop your answer in the comments. What was the longest John Cena had ever lasted in a one-on-one match against Brock Lesnar before WrestlePalooza? I'll give you a hint, it wasn't very long, and it usually ended with Cena being thoroughly dominated. The night of WrestlePalooza arrived, and the atmosphere was electric but tense. As both men made their entrances, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. Lesnar bounded to the ring like a caged animal finally set free, shadowboxing and bouncing on his feet, supremely confident in his impending victory. When his music hit and he walked through that curtain, the entire arena seemed to shake with his presence. But when John Cena's music hit, and this is something that still gives me chills thinking about it, the man who walked through the curtain was not the John Cena we had grown accustomed to seeing. Gone was the colorful merchandise and the playful salutes to the crowd. This Cena was dressed in simple black trunks and boots. His face was a mask of controlled fury. He didn't play to the crowd, didn't acknowledge the mixed reactions he was receiving. His focus was laser sharp, and it was entirely on Brock Lesnar. The bell rang, and what happened in the first 30 seconds defied all expectations. Instead of Lesnar charging forward with his typical aggressive opening, it was Cena who struck first. And I'm not talking about a typical wrestling lockup or a tentative feeling out process. Cena exploded out of his corner like a man possessed, catching Lesnar completely off guard with a series of rapid-fire strikes that backed the beast incarnate into the corner. The crowd was stunned into silence. This wasn't the John Cena they knew. His strikes were precise, technical, and devastatingly effective. Within the first minute, he had already opened a cut above Lesnar's left eye, something that rarely happened to the former UFC heavyweight champion. Lesnar, clearly rattled by this unexpected aggression, attempted to regain control with his signature German suplex, but here's where Cena showed just how much his 3 weeks of intensive training had paid off. He reversed the attempt, slipped behind Lesnar, and locked in a rear naked choke that had the entire wrestling world questioning whether we were watching WWE or UFC. The technical prowess Cena displayed was mind-blowing. Every move was executed with surgical precision. Every counter was perfectly timed. It was as if he had downloaded the fighting styles of every opponent who had ever given Lesnar trouble and combined them into one devastating package. By the 5-minute mark, something unprecedented was happening. Brock Lesnar was on the defensive. The man who had steamrolled through the entire WWE roster was being systematically picked apart by someone the experts had written off as past his prime. Here's another question for the comments section: when was the last time you saw Brock Lesnar genuinely rattled in a wrestling match? Because at WrestlePalooza, the confusion and frustration on his face was impossible to hide. The turning point came around the 8-minute mark, and this is where the match transformed from surprising to absolutely brutal. Lesnar, growing increasingly desperate, attempted his signature F5 finisher. It's a move that has ended countless matches and careers, but Cena saw it coming from a mile away. He slipped out of Lesnar's grasp, landed behind him, and what happened next will be replayed for decades to come. Cena locked in a modified STF submission hold, but this wasn't the submission move wrestling fans were familiar with. This was a legitimate, UFC-quality rear naked choke combined with a body triangle that immediately put Lesnar in serious danger. The technical execution was flawless, and within seconds, Lesnar's face was turning red as the hold cut off his blood supply. What made this moment even more incredible was Cena's psychology during the hold. As Lesnar struggled and fought to escape, Cena leaned in close and could be heard saying, "Who's the old man now, Brock?" The coldness in his voice was chilling, and it was clear this wasn't just about winning a wrestling match, this was personal. Lesnar, using his incredible strength and fighting experience, managed to power out of the hold, but the damage was done. For the first time in years, Brock Lesnar looked vulnerable. His breathing was labored, his movements were sluggish, and most importantly, his aura of invincibility had been shattered. The crowd had gone from stunned silence to electric chaos. Cena's supporters were losing their minds, while Lesnar's fans were in complete disbelief. The impossible was happening right before their eyes. But Cena wasn't done. Not even close. What followed was 15 minutes of the most technically proficient, psychologically brutal wrestling match in recent memory. Every time Lesnar would mount a comeback, Cena would shut it down with perfect timing and execution. It was like watching a chess match played at lightning speed, with Cena staying 3 moves ahead throughout. The final sequence of the match is something that will be studied in wrestling schools for generations. With both men exhausted and bloodied, Lesnar made one last desperate attempt at victory. He hoisted Cena up for what should have been a match-ending F5, but in a moment of pure athletic poetry, Cena reversed it mid-move into his attitude adjustment finisher. But here's the kicker, and this is what separated this match from every other Cena victory: he didn't go for the immediate pinfall. Instead, he picked Lesnar up and hit him with a second attitude adjustment. Then a third. The message was clear: this wasn't just about winning, this was about making a statement. When Cena finally made the cover, the 3 count felt like it echoed through eternity. The referee's hand hit the mat for the final time, and WrestlePalooza erupted in absolute pandemonium. John Cena, the man everyone had written off, had not only defeated Brock Lesnar but had dominated him in a way that nobody thought possible. The aftermath was equally compelling. As Cena's music played and his hand was raised in victory, Lesnar lay motionless in the center of the ring. When he finally came to and realized what had happened, the look of utter disbelief on his face told the entire story. The beast incarnate had been conquered, and he couldn't comprehend how. But perhaps the most powerful moment came during Cena's post-match celebration. Instead of his typical exuberant victory lap, he simply stood in the center of the ring, arms crossed, staring directly into the hard camera. His message was wordless but crystal clear: "I'm not going anywhere." The wrestling world's reaction was immediate and explosive. Social media exploded with reactions ranging from complete shock to accusations that the match had to be fake, though anyone who witnessed the legitimate technique and physicality displayed knew better. Wrestling legends came out of the woodwork to praise what they had witnessed. Mick Foley tweeted, "In 30 years of being around this business, I have never seen a more complete transformation than what John Cena displayed tonight." Stone Cold Steve Austin called it a masterclass in professional wrestling and legitimate fighting combined. Even Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Cena's longtime rival, posted a video praising his former opponent's incredible performance. But perhaps the most telling reaction came from UFC fighters and legitimate combat sports athletes. Multiple UFC champions and former champions took to social media to praise Cena's technical prowess and ground game, with many saying they were genuinely impressed by his submission skills and tactical approach. The numbers tell the story of how shocking this victory was. WWE's stock price jumped 12% in after-hours trading following the event. The match video became the most watched WWE content on YouTube within 48 hours. International media outlets that rarely cover professional wrestling were running headlines about Cena's incredible comeback victory. Here's a question that's been burning up the comment sections of wrestling channels everywhere: was this the greatest comeback victory in WWE history? Drop your thoughts below, because I have a feeling this debate is going to rage for years to come. What makes this victory even more significant is the broader context of where both men's careers stood before this match. Lesnar had been positioned as virtually unbeatable, a part-time performer who could show up and demolish full-time wrestlers without breaking a sweat. His entire mystique was built on the idea that he was on a different level than everyone else in WWE. Cena, meanwhile, had been dealing with the cruel reality that faces every aging athlete: the gradual decline of physical abilities combined with the constant scrutiny of whether it was time to step aside for younger talent. The whispers about his relevance had grown louder with each underwhelming performance. But what happened at WrestlePalooza proved that experience, determination, and proper preparation could overcome what seemed like insurmountable physical advantages. Cena didn't just win the match, he rewrote the narrative of his own career and reminded everyone why he had been the face of WWE for over a decade. The technical breakdown of how Cena achieved this victory reveals just how thoroughly he had prepared. His striking was more precise and varied than ever before. His grappling showed influences from multiple martial arts disciplines. Most importantly, his game plan was perfectly executed from start to finish. Wrestling analysts who broke down the match frame by frame discovered that Cena had studied every single one of Lesnar's previous matches, identifying patterns and weaknesses that even Lesnar himself wasn't aware of. It was preparation on a level rarely seen in professional wrestling. The psychological warfare was equally impressive. By refusing to be intimidated by Lesnar's reputation and instead turning the mental battle back on his opponent, Cena had neutralized one of the beast's most potent weapons: fear. Lesnar was accustomed to opponents being awed by his presence. Cena's complete indifference to his mystique clearly threw Lesnar off his game. What's your take on the mental aspect of this match? Do you think Cena's psychological preparation was as important as his physical training? Let me know in the comments, because this aspect of the victory might be even more impressive than the physical domination. The ripple effects of this match are still being felt throughout WWE and the wrestling world in general. Suddenly, the idea that part-time superstars could waltz in and dominate full-time talent was no longer a given. Cena had proven that with proper preparation and the right mindset, anyone could be beaten. For Brock Lesnar, this loss represented more than just a defeat; it was a complete dismantling of everything he represented in WWE. His aura of invincibility was shattered, his reputation as an unstoppable force was in ruins, and questions about his own future began to surface immediately. The match also reignited debates about legitimate fighting credentials in professional wrestling. Cena's display of genuine martial arts skills raised questions about how many other WWE superstars possessed similar abilities that simply weren't showcased in typical wrestling storylines. From a business perspective, this victory couldn't have come at a better time for WWE. With ratings struggles and increased competition from other wrestling promotions, having one of their biggest stars prove he was far from finished provided a massive shot in the arm for the company's credibility and mainstream appeal. The lasting legacy of this match extends far beyond the wrestling ring. It became a story about perseverance, preparation, and refusing to accept limitations that others place on you. Cena's victory resonated with fans on a level that transcended sports entertainment. For younger wrestlers watching, it demonstrated that longevity in the business wasn't just about politics or favoritism, it was about constantly evolving and refusing to become complacent. Cena's 3-week transformation became a blueprint for how veteran performers could extend their careers. The most remarkable aspect of this entire story might be how it changed the perception of both wrestlers involved. Lesnar went from being seen as an unstoppable force to a beatable opponent who could be outworked and outprepared. Cena transformed from a fading veteran to a dangerous opponent who had somehow become more formidable with age. Industry insiders reported that the victory sparked a renaissance in Cena's career that nobody saw coming. Suddenly, other promotions were interested in booking him for major events. Movie studios that had cooled on working with him began reaching out again. The victory had restored his marketability in a way that seemed impossible just months earlier. Here's a final question for the wrestling historians in the audience. In terms of career-defining moments, where does this victory rank in John Cena's legendary career? Consider not just the victory itself, but the context, the preparation, and the statement it made about refusing to accept decline. The truth is, what happened at WrestlePalooza wasn't just a wrestling match, it was a masterpiece of athletic performance, psychological warfare, and pure determination. John Cena didn't just defeat Brock Lesnar, he reminded the entire world why he had been the face of sports entertainment for over a decade. When the final bell rang and Cena stood victorious over the man everyone thought was unbeatable, it sent a message that reverberates far beyond the wrestling ring: never count out someone who refuses to be counted out. In a world obsessed with youth and always looking for the next big thing, John Cena proved that experience, preparation, and sheer willpower could overcome any obstacle. The brutal reality is that this victory will be remembered as one of the greatest upsets in WWE history, but more than that, it will be remembered as the night John Cena reminded everyone, including himself, exactly who he was and what he was capable of achieving. So the next time someone tells you that something is impossible, that you're too old, too slow, or too far past your prime, remember WrestlePalooza. Remember how John Cena took everything the critics threw at him, used it as fuel, and delivered a performance that nobody will ever forget. And if you still think this was just another wrestling match, if you still believe the hype about certain people being unbeatable, then you clearly weren't paying attention to what really happened in that ring. Because what John Cena did to Brock Lesnar wasn't just a victory, it was a statement that will echo through sports entertainment history for decades to come.